My name is Eliza Foster. 2 hours into my 18th birthday party, my father handed me a heavy brass pen and a document that would sign away a $14 million inheritance. We were standing near an ice sculpture at a rented country club in Sonoma. The string quartet was playing something bright and cheerful. My father kept his hand pressed firmly over the top half of the page, covering the legal jargon. "Just a standard probate formality for your grandfather's estate, Ellie," he whispered. He smiled for the event photographer circulating the room. "Just sign right here on the bottom line and we can get back to your party." I smiled back. I took the pen. I told him I needed to set my sparkling cider down on a table first. Instead of signing, I walked straight into the coat room, locked the heavy oak door, and opened my laptop. Sitting on a pile of expensive cashmere coats, it took me exactly 3 minutes to execute a digital transfer with a private wealth attorney. In 3 minutes, I locked my grandfather's entire 40-acre legacy vineyard into an irrevocable California trust. When I walked back out to the ballroom, my father was clinking champagne glasses with a man from a luxury resort development company. They were toasting to a $14 million sale that was already dead. Before I tell you what happened when the county recorder's office opened the next morning, please hit like and subscribe if you enjoy stories about family secrets and quiet payback. Drop your city and local time in the comments below. I read every single one. To understand why my own parents tried to steal my future in front of 50 guests, you have to understand the soil in Sonoma. You have to understand my grandfather, Thomas Foster. My parents, Victoria and David, spent their entire lives performing wealth in San Francisco. They leased imported cars they could barely afford. They paid for exclusive club memberships on revolving credit. My older sister Savannah fit perfectly into their curated world. She was 24, currently living rent-free in their guest room after her third lifestyle startup failed. My parents bailed her out every time, calling her an ambitious visionary. But the vineyard was different. It was real. Grandpa Thomas built it with his own calloused hands. While my parents chased social status in the city, I spent my summers with him. I learned how to test the soil. I learned how to prune the vines. My parents hated the farm. They saw it as a bank account trapped under dirt. Grandpa Thomas knew this. He knew the second his heart stopped, his life's work would be paved over for a boutique hotel. He passed away last October. At his funeral, while the dirt was still fresh, my father stood near the reception table and told my mother it was time to liquidate the dirt. He thought I was just a quiet, grieving teenager who did not understand business. He did not know that Grandpa had spent the last 3 years teaching me the law. 40 acres of Cabernet Sauvignon and Chardonnay vines stretch across the rolling hills of Sonoma Valley. The land looks different depending on who is standing on the ridge. If you were my father, David, you saw a liability. You saw property tax brackets, maintenance overhead, and a slow return on investment. If you were my grandfather, Thomas, you saw a living ecosystem that required respect. I saw what my grandfather saw. While my parents hosted catered brunch parties in their sterile San Francisco townhouse, I took the bus north every single weekend. The city always felt loud and hollow. The vineyard smelled like wet earth, crushed stems, and old oak barrels. I loved the dirt. I loved the quiet. Grandpa Thomas never treated me like a fragile child. He handed me a pair of steel pruning shears when I was 10 years old. He showed me how to read the leaves. Yellow edges meant a nutrient deficiency in the soil. Shriveling meant we needed to adjust the irrigation lines. He paid deep attention to the roots. My parents only paid attention to the surface. This divide defined the Foster family. To understand the threat my parents posed to my future, you need to understand my older sister, Savannah. She is 6 years older than me and possesses the kind of polished charm that makes investors open their wallets. Savannah never touched a pruning shear in her life. She preferred glass boardrooms, pitch decks, and expensive networking events. Her latest venture was a premium mindfulness subscription box service. It burned through $300,000 of angel investment in 8 months. I remember sitting at the kitchen island doing my calculus homework the night the business folded. Savannah sat across from me, weeping into her hands, wearing a silk robe. My mother stroked her hair, offering gentle affirmations. My father paced the hardwood floor, dialing his private bank representative. They did not lecture her on financial responsibility. They did not suggest she get a normal job. My father called it a tough market and wrote her a bridge loan check to cover her luxury apartment rent for the next 6 months. Savannah was the visionary. I was the background noise. My parents needed an heir who fit their country club narrative. They wanted a daughter who wore designer labels and spoke in corporate buzzwords. I wore faded denim and smelled like fertilizer. They tolerated my weekends at the farm because it kept me out of their way. They never considered that I was actually paying attention to how the world worked. But Grandpa Thomas paid attention. He watched the dynamic play out for years. I remember a specific Sunday dinner 2 years ago. My parents rarely visited the estate, but they drove up for my grandfather's 75th birthday. My mother complained about the dust ruining her suede shoes before she even reached the front porch. During dinner, my father swirled his wine and looked out the dining room window at the setting sun. "The property value out here is peaking, Thomas," he said. "The taxes alone must be draining your cash reserves. Apex Hospitality just bought that parcel down the road. They turned it into a high-end wellness resort, paid out in pure cash. You should really think about your exit strategy." My grandfather set his silver fork down. The scrape against the porcelain was the only sound in the room. "This land grows grapes, David," my grandfather said. His voice was low and steady. "It does not grow spas." My father offered a thin, patronizing smile. "Just thinking about your legacy, old man." Later that night, long after my parents went to sleep in the guest wing, I found Grandpa sitting in his dark office. The glow of a single brass desk lamp illuminated a stack of heavy leather binders. He gestured for me to sit in the chair across from him. He knew. He knew the precise moment his heart gave out my father would sell the soil to the highest bidder. Savannah would demand a cut for her next vanity project. The decades-old vines would be ripped up by bulldozers to make room for infinity pools and valet parking. That night, my education shifted. We stopped talking about soil acidity and weather patterns. We started talking about asset protection. Grandpa opened the heavy binders. He showed me the operating margins for the vineyard. He explained the legal difference between a quitclaim deed and a warranty deed. He taught me how probate courts function and how families tear themselves apart the second a wealthy patriarch dies. "Do not trust them, Ellie," he told me. His voice was rough, carrying the weight of a man who realized he had raised a son he could not respect. "They see numbers. We see roots. You have to be smarter than their greed." I was barely 16, but I absorbed every word. For 2 years, we ran a shadow curriculum in that dusty office. I learned how to read a corporate balance sheet before I learned how to drive a car. I memorized tax codes. I learned how real estate developers isolate vulnerable landowners. Then came last October. A sudden stroke. Just like that, the strongest man I ever knew was gone. The funeral was held on a Tuesday afternoon. The sky was the color of wet slate. The wind off the bay was sharp and unforgiving. I stood near the back of the cemetery wearing a simple black coat, holding a single vine, cutting in my bare hand. My mother wore a custom black dress that cost more than our vineyard foreman makes in a month. Savannah wore dark, oversized sunglasses and spent the entire service typing on her phone, stepping away twice to take a call. As the heavy mahogany casket was lowered into the earth, I watched my father step away from the grave. He walked toward the edge of the manicured lawn to greet a man wearing a sharp gray suit. It was not a friend of my grandfather. It was a commercial real estate broker I recognized from a magazine article Grandpa had shown me. I stepped closer, keeping my distance hidden by the shadow of a large oak tree. The wind carried their voices right to me. "We can start liquidating the dirt by the end of the quarter," my father said quietly. He shook the broker's hand using a firm, practiced grip. "I just need to clear a few estate hurdles first. Keep Apex on the hook." I stood there as the cold wind cut through my coat. My grandfather was not even buried yet. The soil had not even settled over his casket, and my father was already counting the money. I looked back at my family. My mother was fixing her lipstick in a pocket mirror. Savannah was handing a valet ticket to an attendant. My father was smiling at a developer. I realized right then that I was alone with the wolves, and the wolves were already looking for the keys to Grandpa's office. The morning after the funeral, my family did not mourn. They inventoried. I stood in the hallway of the main farmhouse and watched my sister turn a sanctuary into a garage sale. Savannah walked through the living room with a pad of neon pink sticky notes and a silver Sharpie. She wore a designer tracksuit and held a cup of artisan coffee. She stuck a pink square on the antique grandfather clock near the foyer. She wrote a dollar sign and a string of numbers. That clock had chimed every hour of my childhood. Savannah did not care. She moved to the Persian rug my grandfather bought in Istanbul 40 years ago. Another pink square. Another price tag. I watched her label the leather armchair, where Grandpa used to read his agricultural journals. Estate liquidators pay top dollar for authentic mid-century pieces, Savannah said without looking up from her phone. She typed a quick message and sighed. We should probably get a team in here to clear this junk out by next week. The dust is terrible for my sinuses. I did not argue with her. I did not scream. I just walked away. Have you ever watched someone you love turn a memory into a price tag? Have you ever seen greed wear the mask of practicality? If you have, you know exactly why I stayed silent. I let her play her game. I had work to do. I retreated down the hall and locked the door to Grandpa Thomas' private office. The room smelled like old paper-dried sage and his signature pipe tobacco. It was the only room in the house Savannah had not reached yet. The afternoon sun slanted through the wooden blinds, catching dust motes suspended in the quiet air. I sat in his chair. I placed my hands flat on the heavy oak desk. This desk was his command center. From this chair, he managed crop rotations, negotiated distribution contracts, and fought off corporate developers year after year. I needed to pack his personal items before my parents hired strangers to throw them in garbage bags. I started with the top drawers. I found old fountain pens, bundles of receipts tied with twine, and field notebooks filled with his cramped handwriting. I packed everything carefully into a cardboard box. I moved to the bottom right drawer. It held thick, heavy files containing old soil reports. I pulled the drawer all the way out to empty the back. As the wooden box slid off its metal tracks, my knuckles brushed against something rough. I froze. I reached my hand back into the empty cavern of the desk. My fingers traced the underside of the heavy oak top. There was a square of heavy-duty masking tape. I peeled the tape back. A thick cream-colored envelope fell into my palm. My name was written across the front in his unmistakable script. I opened it. My hands were steady, but my breath felt thin. Inside, there was no long, emotional goodbye. There was no poetry about the setting sun over the vines. Grandpa Thomas was a pragmatic man. He dealt in facts. The envelope contained two things. The first was a business card printed on heavy, expensive cardstock. The text read, Evelyn Vance, Estate Attorney. The address was a suite in the financial district of San Francisco. There was a direct phone number printed in the bottom corner. The second was a single sheet of lined paper. The message was short. They will try to take it, Ellie. Call her before you turn 18. I read the words 3 times. The letters blurred, then sharpened. He knew my parents would circle the property the moment he was gone. He knew I would be the one to clean out his desk. He left the map right where I would find it. I slipped the business card and the note into the front pocket of my jeans. Less than 30 seconds later, the brass doorknob rattled. A key slid into the lock and the door swung open. My mother, Victoria, stepped into the office. She wore a tailored beige blazer and pristine riding boots. She looked out of place like an actor standing on the wrong stage. Her eyes darted around the room, taking in the open drawers and the packed box on the desk. She offered a tight, sympathetic smile. It was the exact same smile she used when dealing with difficult retail employees. Ellie, sweetheart, she said. Her voice was smooth, coated in an artificial warmth. What are you doing in here? The dust is going to ruin your clothes. I am packing his notebooks, I replied quietly. She waved her hand in the air, dismissing the sentiment. We can hire someone to do that. Right now, I need the keys to the tractor barn. Your father is bringing an appraiser by this afternoon to value the heavy machinery. I looked at her. The tractor barn held the combines and the harvesters. You do not appraise the harvest equipment unless you are planning to stop farming. They were pricing the tools that kept this land alive. I do not have the keys, I lied. My voice did not shake. Victoria sighed a sharp sound of irritation. Well, tell the foreman to unlock it. She stepped closer, placing a manicured hand on my shoulder. She smelled like expensive floral perfume and cold strategy. Listen to me, Ellie. I know this is a hard time. You and your grandfather were close, but you have your senior year to worry about. You have college applications. You need to focus on your future in the city. She squeezed my shoulder. Dad and I are handling all the boring legal stuff. We are taking care of the estate, so you do not have to stress your teenage mind with probate laws and tax codes. Just focus on your studies. Let us handle the adults' work. Adults' work. That was the lie. They were not shielding me from stress. They were isolating me from information. They wanted me blind and compliant. They wanted me to believe I had no voice, no power, and no stake in the ground beneath my feet. They needed a quiet daughter who would sign whatever they placed in front of her. That sounds nice, Mom, I said. Thank you. She patted my cheek, satisfied that her manipulation had worked. She turned and clicked her way down the hallway, shouting for Savannah to stop tagging the dining chairs until the appraiser finished with the barn. I waited until the house was clear. I walked out the back door and stood on the wooden porch. The air was cooling down. The sun dipped lower, casting long shadows across the rows of Cabernet vines. The estate was silent, waiting. I reached into my pocket and pulled out the thick business card. Grandpa had instructed me to call before I turned 18. My 18th birthday was exactly 3 months away. Every second counted now. I dialed the number. I listened to the line ring. Once, twice. Evelyn Vance, a voice answered. The tone was sharp, efficient, and awake. Hello, I said. My name is Eliza Foster. I am Thomas Foster's granddaughter. The line went dead quiet for 2 full seconds. When the woman spoke again, her voice carried a distinct edge of anticipation. I have been waiting for you to find that card, Eliza. I packed my bags the Sunday after the funeral and rode back to San Francisco in the back of my parents' luxury SUV. The silence in the car was not heavy with grief. It hummed with anticipation. My father drummed his fingers against the leather steering wheel. My mother scrolled through architectural digests on her tablet. Savannah slept in the passenger seat, dreaming of her next venture. I sat in the back, staring at the passing highway, feeling the weight of the business card in my pocket. Evelyn Vance had given me brief, specific instructions before hanging up. Go home, be quiet, watch everything, do not change your behavior. Our Pacific Heights townhouse operated like a museum. It featured white marble countertops, glass display cases, and furniture nobody was allowed to sit on. It was a space designed to project success, not comfort. Normally, the house was empty during the week. My father spent his days at his venture capital firm trying to salvage dying tech portfolios. My mother attended charity luncheons. But the week after we buried Grandpa Thomas, the rhythm of the house shifted. My father stopped going to his downtown office. He set up a command center in his home study. The strangers arrived on a Tuesday. I was sitting at the kitchen island working on a calculus worksheet when a black sedan parked out front. 3 men walked up the front steps. They wore sharp charcoal tailoring and carried identical leather briefcases. They did not look like friends of the family offering condolences. They moved with the brisk, predatory efficiency of corporate acquisitions. My father opened the door before they even knocked. He shook their hands with a wide, eager smile. David Foster was a man who craved leverage. For years, he lived in the shadow of his own father's genuine wealth. My grandfather built something tangible from the earth. My father shuffled digital money between failing startups. But that afternoon, ushering those 3 men into his private study, he looked like a king claiming his throne. He pointed them toward the leather chairs. Victoria brought them imported sparkling water. The heavy double doors of the study closed, but the latch did not catch. A sliver of space remained just wide enough to let the hallway light slip through. I slid off my bar stool. I walked softly down the corridor, keeping my weight on the edges of the hardwood floorboards where they did not creak. I pressed my shoulder against the painted drywall. I stopped breathing. I listened. The lead negotiator had a voice like crushed gravel. I would later learn his name was Marcus. He represented Apex Hospitality Group. Marcus did not deal in sentiment, he dealt in timelines. "We have reviewed the preliminary topography reports," Marcus said. "The soil density on the South Ridge is perfect for the foundation of the Wellness Pavilion. But we need to lock down the zoning permits for commercial rezoning before the end of the fiscal year. The demolition crews will need 60 days to level the existing structures." Level the existing structures. He was talking about the 19th century tractor barn. He was talking about the farmhouse where my grandfather took his final breath. He was talking about tearing up decades of deep-rooted vines to pour concrete. My mother spoke next. Her tone was light and conversational. "We fully agree, Marcus. The aesthetic synergy of a luxury resort fits the Sonoma profile much better than an outdated agricultural operation. The land is screaming for modernization." Then another voice cut through the corporate chatter. "Savannah." My sister had dragged a chair into the corner of the room. She was supposed to be mourning her grandfather, but she was negotiating her own payday. "David," she said, leaning forward, "if Apex expedites the escrow, when does my liquidity free up? I have a trademark deadline for the new lifestyle brand, and I cannot stall my manufacturers in Milan much longer." My father chuckled. It was a rich, patronizing sound. "Relax, Savannah. The $2 million seed fund we discussed will hit your holding account the day the wire clears. Just keep playing the grieving granddaughter for a few more weeks." $2 million. They were carving up the estate like a roasted animal. They were behaving with breathtaking audacity, acting as if the 40-acre legacy was already sitting in their bank accounts. They spoke of the vineyard not as a place, but as a cleared hurdle. They did not mention my name once. I was less than an afterthought. I was a minor inconvenience they assumed they had already solved. I backed away from the door. I retreated to my bedroom. I sat on the edge of my mattress and stared at the wall. Evelyn Vance had told me to watch. Now I needed proof. I needed to see exactly what my father was promising these men. The opportunity came on a Friday night. My parents had a mandatory appearance at a silent auction for a modern art museum. It was a high society event they could not afford to miss. Savannah was out at a club in the Mission District, celebrating her imaginary future wealth. I told my mother I had a history paper due on Monday and needed to stay home. She kissed my forehead, told me to order a salad for dinner, and walked out the door wearing diamond earrings she had bought on credit. I waited until I saw the taillights of their hired car turn the corner. I walked downstairs. The house was dead quiet. I turned the brass knob of my father's study. He locked it. But my father was a creature of predictable habits. He kept the spare key hidden inside a hollowed-out book on the hall shelf. I retrieved the key, unlocked the door, and stepped inside. The room smelled like expensive cologne and stale coffee. His desk was chaotic. David believed that a cluttered desk signaled a busy, important mind. Stacks of printed emails, bank statements, and legal pads covered the mahogany surface. I ignored the junk. I looked for the leather portfolio the Apex representative had left behind. I found it resting near the laser printer. I flipped the cover open. The document was thick, bound by a heavy black clip. The header read Draft Purchase and Sale Agreement. Below it, the parties were listed. Apex Hospitality Group as the buyer. The Thomas Foster Estate as the seller. I pulled my phone out of my pocket. I turned the brightness down and muted the camera shutter sound. I turned the pages, snapping a clear, high-resolution photo of each sheet. My hands moved with steady, mechanical precision. I reached page 4. The financial summary. The purchase price was typed in bold black ink. $14 million. Paid in full. Cash transfer upon closing. No contingencies for financing. It was a firm, undeniable offer. It was enough money to clear my parents' mounting debts fund Savannah's vanity brand and maintain their Pacific Heights facade for another 20 years. But as I turned to page 7, I found the catch. Apex was a ruthless corporate entity. They did not hand over $14 million without ironclad guarantees. I zoomed in on Article B, subsection 4. The stipulation: the buyer requires a clean, unencumbered title transfer. The property must be delivered free of any liens, outstanding tax burdens, or heir disputes. The seller must provide legally binding waivers from all named beneficiaries prior to the opening of escrow. I read the timeline attached to the closing schedule. David had promised Apex that the title would transfer seamlessly the first week of November. I stared at the date printed on the page. The first week of November. My 18th birthday was the last Thursday of October. The pieces locked together in my mind like the gears of a vault. My father could not sell the property while I was a minor. As my temporary conservator, he would have to petition a probate court to liquidate an asset intended for me. That process could take years and invite heavy judicial scrutiny. Apex would walk away from a deal tangled in a prolonged legal battle. They wanted clean dirt and they wanted it fast. David had aligned the closing date with the exact moment I became a legal adult. He needed my signature to release the title without a court order. He needed a document stating that I willingly waived my rights to the estate, allowing the sale to proceed uncontested. But my parents had not spoken a word to me about the future of the farm. They had not asked for my input. They had told me they were handling the boring legal stuff, so I would not have to worry. I stood in the quiet study bathed in the blue light of my phone screen. A chilling realization crawled up my spine. My parents were not planning to ask for my consent. They were operating as if the $14 million check was already printed. The timeline was too tight to risk a teenage rebellion. They were going to place a piece of paper in front of me, bury the truth under technical language, and if I hesitated, they would forge my signature. They were not just selling my inheritance. They were preparing to steal my identity to do it. I carefully closed the leather portfolio, locked the study door, and walked upstairs to send the photos to my lawyer. The address on the business card led me to a towering glass building in the financial district. I took the train after school. I kept my uniform on to look like a teenager running an errand. The elevator climbed 42 floors in silence. When the doors parted, I stepped into a reception area defined by sharp angles and frosted glass. Evelyn Vance was waiting for me. She did not offer a warm hug or a sympathetic smile. She possessed the calculated stillness of a predator. Her suit was perfectly tailored. Her desk held nothing but a legal pad and a single manila folder. Grandpa Thomas did not hire a family counselor. He hired a shark. I sat across from her. I slid my phone across the smooth surface of her desk. I told her to look at the photos I took in my father's study. Evelyn reviewed each image. Her expression never shifted. She read the $14 million purchase price. She read the stipulations Apex Hospitality Group had woven into the fine print. She noted the required closing date perfectly aligned with my upcoming birthday. When she finished, she pushed the phone back toward me. "Your father is playing a very dangerous game," Evelyn said. Her voice was low and precise. "He is banking on your ignorance. He assumes your grandfather left the vineyard in a standard will." I asked her what a standard will meant for me. Evelyn leaned forward. "If Thomas had used a standard will, the estate would be sitting in probate court right now. Probate is public. Probate is slow. Your father could easily contest a will. He could claim your grandfather lacked mental capacity. He could drain the estate accounts just paying legal fees to fight you." Thomas knew David would do exactly that. She opened the manila folder. She turned a thick stack of documents toward me. The paper was heavy and stamped with official county seals. So Thomas bypassed the court entirely. Evelyn continued. He created a generation skipping irrevocable trust. He transferred the title of the 40-acre vineyard into this trust 3 years ago. Legally, the property did not belong to Thomas when he died. It belongs to the trust. And upon your 18th birthday, you become the sole successor beneficiary. Your father has no claim. Your sister has no claim. I stared at my name typed in bold ink on the legal document. I felt a sudden wave of relief. It was a tangible shield. I asked Evelyn why we could not just show this to my father right now and end the nightmare. Evelyn did not smile. She folded her hands together. "Because you are 17, she said. She explained the trap my father was currently building. Because I was still a minor, David retained certain temporary conservatorship rights over my general welfare. He did not have the power to break an irrevocable trust, but he had the power to create a legal disaster. If David presents you with a quitclaim deed Evelyn warned and you sign it, or if he forges your signature as your legal guardian, he can rush that document to the county recorder. A quitclaim deed surrenders your interest in the property." I told her the trust would prove the deed was fraudulent. Evelyn nodded. "Yes, eventually. But the law moves slowly. If Apex Hospitality files a forged deed and opens escrow, it creates what we call a cloud on the title. To clear that cloud, we would have to drag your father and a billion-dollar hospitality corporation into civil court." She paused to let the reality sink in. "Apex has infinite legal resources," she said. "They can delay hearings for a decade. They can bleed you dry. By the time a judge rules in your favor, the vineyard would be bankrupt. The vines would be dead. You would win the dirt, but you would lose the farm. We cannot let them file that paper." I felt the air thin out in the room. My father's arrogance was not just annoying. It was a loaded weapon pointed directly at my future. I asked her how we disarm him. "Timing," Evelyn said. "We beat them with timing." She pulled a fresh sheet of paper from her pad and drew a simple timeline. She marked a date at the far right. My 18th birthday. Apex requires a clean title to close the $14 million deal, she explained. Corporations despise risk. They will run a final title search the morning they are scheduled to wire the funds. We are going to make sure they find a fire alarm. Evelyn wrote 2 words on the paper. Lis pendens. "It is Latin for suit pending," she told me. "The exact minute the clock strikes midnight on your 18th birthday, you are legally an adult. Your father's conservatorship evaporates. At that exact minute, you will digitally sign an acceptance of the trust. When the county recorder opens their doors at 8 in the morning, I will be standing at the front of the line. I will file the lis pendens against the property." I asked her what that would do. "It freezes the board," Evelyn said. "A lis pendens is a public declaration of a legal dispute regarding real estate. It attaches directly to the property deed. When Apex runs their final title search, that notice will flag their system in bright red. It tells them the seller does not have the right to sell. No title insurance company will underwrite the transaction. The developers will pull their $14 million off the table instantly. Your father will be left holding a breached contract." It was a perfect strategy. It relied on the law, not emotion. It used their own rushed timeline against them. But there was a catch. I could hear it in the silence that followed. Evelyn looked me directly in the eyes. Her gaze was unblinking. "For this to work, your father cannot know I exist," she said. "He cannot know you found the letter. If he senses that you are seeking legal counsel, he will accelerate his timeline. He will forge the documents early and push Apex to close before your birthday." I understood what she was asking me to do. "You have 3 months until you turn 18, Evelyn said. "For the next 90 days, you have to go back to that house. You have to sit at their dinner table. You have to smile at your sister. You have to be the clueless, obedient teenager they expect you to be. You cannot react. You cannot fight back. You have to let them believe they have already won. 3 months. 90 days of psychological warfare. 90 days of listening to my family plan vacations using stolen money. 90 days of watching my father shake hands with the men plotting to bulldoze my grandfather's legacy." "Can you do that, Eliza?" Evelyn asked. I thought about Savannah placing neon pink sticky notes on my grandfather's antique clock. I thought about my mother complaining about the dust on her shoes. I thought about my father standing near a fresh grave talking about liquidating the dirt. They thought I was weak. They thought my silence was submission. They did not realize that silence is also how a hunter stalks its prey. I stood up from the leather chair. I picked up my backpack. "I will see you on my birthday, Evelyn," I said. I rode the elevator back down to the street. The San Francisco air felt cold against my face. I took the train back to the Pacific Heights townhouse. I unlocked the front door. My father was standing in the foyer. He was holding a glass of scotch. He looked at my school uniform and offered a warm, paternal smile. "How was your history test, Ellie?" he asked. I smiled back. I made my eyes wide and innocent. "It was hard, Dad," I said, "but I think I aced it." I walked past him and headed up the stairs. The game had officially begun. I just had to survive the next move. The first week of my final 90 days was an exercise in extreme discipline. I sat through family dinners where my parents discussed their winter vacation plans to Aspen, knowing those flights were booked on the assumption of a $14 million payout. I kept my posture relaxed. I kept my voice neutral. I asked my father how his day was, and he lied smoothly, telling me the venture capital market was looking bright. But my parents were not foolish enough to leave a $14 million transaction entirely to chance. They needed insurance. They needed to ensure my psychological compliance before they slid the final paperwork across the table. They sent my sister. Savannah had ignored me for 17 years. To her, I was an awkward accessory, a quiet shadow that lived in the same house but did not share her orbit. She operated in a world of curated social media feeds, exclusive pop-up events, and conversations that always circled back to her own ambition. So when she knocked on my bedroom door on a Tuesday evening and asked if I wanted to spend Saturday at a luxury spa in Napa, the alarm bells in my head were deafening. I looked up from my desk. She was leaning against the doorframe wearing a soft cashmere sweater, offering a practiced sisterly smile. "You have been working so hard lately, Ellie," she said. "Senior year is stressful, and with Grandpa passing, I just thought we could use some girl time. Just the two of us. My treat." I knew immediately it was not her treat. My father was funding the excursion. It was a reconnaissance mission masked as a bonding experience. They needed Savannah to take my emotional temperature. "That sounds amazing, Savannah," I said. "Thank you." Saturday morning arrived with bright, unfiltered California sunlight. We took Savannah's imported convertible up the coast. She played indie pop music and talked about a new matcha cafe she wanted to invest in. I nodded along, playing the role of the eager, inexperienced younger sister. The spa was nestled in the Napa Hills, far removed from our own vineyard. It smelled of eucalyptus and expensive essential oils. We sat in plush white robes in a private lounge waiting for our treatments. A server brought us cucumber water. Savannah took a sip, set her glass down, and let the silence stretch for just a moment. It was a calculated pause. The pivot. "Dad looks so tired lately, do you not think?" she asked. Her voice was soft-laced with a manufactured worry. "He has been working a lot," I replied carefully. Savannah sighed, looking out the large pane-glass window at the manicured lawn. "He is drowning, Ellie." The venture capital firm took a huge hit last quarter. 2 major portfolios went under. He is trying to hide it from us, from Mom, but I see the numbers. We are actually really close to bankruptcy. She turned to look at me, her eyes wide, performing vulnerability. I remembered the $2 million seed fund my father promised her just a week ago. She was acting as if we were on the brink of losing our home while secretly planning her own empire with the stolen cash. "It is terrifying," she continued, leaning closer. "The debt is astronomical, and with the estate taxes from Grandpa's farm on top of it. I do not know how they are going to manage. It is just sitting there, this old, boring farm, bleeding them dry when they have given us everything." The gaslighting was masterful. She was painting our parents as selfless martyrs and the vineyard as a parasitic burden. She was setting the stage for the sale, framing it not as a theft, but as a rescue mission. I looked down at my hands resting in my lap. I made my voice shake just a little. "I did not know it was that bad," I whispered. Savannah reached out and covered my hand with hers. Her skin was warm, her nails perfectly painted. "It is," she said. "But Dad has a plan. He always has a plan. He is talking to some investors who might want to buy the land. Develop it into something modern. It would clear all the debt. It would set up a trust for your college tuition. It would literally save this family." There it was. The hook. Good daughters sacrifice for their parents. Good daughters do not ask questions about the law or demand to read the fine print. They sign the paper and feel grateful for the opportunity to help. For 17 years, I was the scapegoat. I was the dirt-covered disappointment who preferred the company of a stubborn old farmer over the elite circles of San Francisco. Now suddenly I was being handed the role of savior. I looked up at her. I let a tear pool in the corner of my eye. "Whatever they need to do, Savannah," I said. My voice was thick with fake emotion. "I just want them to be okay. I just want us to be okay. Grandpa's gone. The land does not matter if it tears us apart." Savannah squeezed my hand. A genuine smile broke through her practiced worry. It was the smile of someone who had just closed a difficult sale. "You are so mature, Ellie," she said. "Dad is going to be so relieved when I tell him you understand." The massage therapist arrived a moment later, ending the performance. Savannah spent the rest of the afternoon radiating a triumphant energy. She talked about the future. She talked about her brand. She did not bring up the farm again. She had completed her assignment. We drove back to the city as the sun set over the Golden Gate Bridge. I listened to Savannah hum along to the radio. I felt a cold, hard clarity settling in my chest. My family was not just greedy. They were entirely ruthless. They were willing to emotionally manipulate me, using the very real grief of losing my grandfather to secure their own comfort. They believed they had me completely under their control. We pulled into the driveway of the townhouse. My father was waiting in the kitchen when we walked in. He looked up from his laptop, his eyes darting quickly to Savannah. Savannah gave him a subtle, almost imperceptible nod. A confirmation. The asset was secured. My father smiled broadly. His shoulders relaxed. He offered to order takeout from my favorite Italian place. I thanked him, told him I was exhausted from the spa, and headed upstairs to my room. I closed my bedroom door. I did not turn on the lights. I walked over to the small corkboard hanging above my desk. Tucked behind a photograph of Grandpa Thomas and me was a small calendar. I picked up a red pen. I drew a thick, dark line through another day. 82 days left. My resolve hardened into ice. The psychological warfare was supposed to break me down, but it was having the opposite effect. Every lie they told, every fake tear my sister shed, only solidified my determination to burn their plans to the ground. But I knew my father. Comfort made him careless, but greed made him paranoid. Savannah's report would buy me time, but it would not stop the pressure. The closer we got to the closing date, the tighter the vice would turn. They would need to ensure my compliance was absolute. They would need to eliminate any possibility of me asking for outside help or demanding independence. I sat on my bed in the dark, staring at the calendar. They had tried to manipulate my emotions. When that was not enough, I knew exactly what they would target next. They would target my survival. They would try to cut my lifelines. Emotional manipulation was their first tactic. Financial starvation was their second. They realized Savannah's performance at the spa did not yield the immediate, desperate compliance they required. I was acting obedient, but I was not acting panicked. My father needed me panicked. He needed me begging for a solution so he could hand me a pen and play the hero. The new strategy began on a Monday morning in late September. I walked into the kitchen to grab my car keys from the Marble Island. My mother was standing by the espresso machine wearing a pristine silk blouse that had just been delivered the day before. She reached out and placed her hand flat over my keys. Her face settled into a mask of practiced maternal regret. "You will have to take the bus to school today, Ellie," she said. Her voice was quiet, coated in a thick layer of artificial sympathy. I asked her why. "Your father had to make some very difficult phone calls this morning," she explained, staring at her own reflection in the chrome appliance. "We had to cancel the insurance policy on your car. The premiums were just too high. We are facing severe liquidity issues this quarter. We all have to tighten our belts." I looked at the keys under her manicured hand. I looked at the new silk blouse she was wearing. I did not point out the contradiction. I simply nodded, picked up my backpack, and walked out the front door to catch the city bus. 2 nights later, the squeeze tightened. My father summoned me to his home study. It was the exact same room where I had photographed his treason just weeks prior. He was sitting behind his mahogany desk, bathed in the glow of his computer monitor. He gestured for me to sit in the leather chair opposite him. He turned his monitor around so I could see the screen. It was a spreadsheet filled with red numbers. I knew how to read a balance sheet better than he thought, but I kept my face blank. "I want to talk to you about your senior year, Ellie," he said. He rubbed his temples, performing the role of an exhausted patriarch carrying the weight of the world. "And your college applications." I leaned forward, playing the attentive daughter. I asked him if something was wrong. He let out a heavy sigh. "The venture capital market is unforgiving right now. My firm is bleeding capital. I have been pulling from our personal savings to keep the house afloat, but those reserves are gone." He paused, waiting for the fear to register in my eyes. He waited for me to ask about my future. I gave him the silence he needed to continue. "The university you want to attend in the fall," he said, lowering his voice. "The tuition is steep. As of right now, your college fund is empty. I had to redirect those assets to cover our immediate debts. I cannot pay for your senior year graduation fees, your textbooks, or your upcoming tuition. I am so sorry, sweetheart." It was a brilliant, cruel strategy. For a normal 17-year-old girl, losing her college dream would be devastating. It would induce sheer panic. A normal teenager would cry. A normal teenager would beg her father to find a way, any way to fix it. That was his cue. He leaned across the desk, lowering his voice into a conspiratorial whisper. "There is one option," he said softly. "Grandpa left us that land in Sonoma. It is a redundant asset. It drains our taxes and produces very little yield. If we liquidate it, if we sell the dirt to a commercial developer, it would clear my debts. It would fully fund your university tuition. It would secure Savannah's future. But I need to know you are on board with letting it go." He looked at me, his eyes searching my face for the breakdown. He wanted me to plead with him to sell the farm. He wanted to forge my consent by making it my idea. I looked at the red numbers on the screen. I thought about the $14 million cash offer sitting in his leather portfolio. I thought about Evelyn Vance waiting for the clock to strike midnight. "I understand, Dad," I said. My voice was steady and quiet. "Times are hard. We have to do what is best." I stood up from the chair. I did not shed a single tear. I did not ask him for a dime. I walked out of the study and gently closed the door behind me. The next afternoon, instead of coming straight home from school, I walked 6 blocks to a small, independent coffee shop. I asked the manager for an application. I was hired on the spot to wipe down tables and operate the cash register for minimum wage. I started working early morning shifts before my first class. I woke up at 4 in the morning. I rode the dark city bus, smelling like roasted espresso beans and bleach. I took extra shifts on the weekends. I used my tips to pay for my own school supplies, my own lunches, and my own bus fare. I was sitting on a $12 million irrevocable trust, and I was scrubbing dried milk off a linoleum counter to survive. It was exhausting physical labor, but it was nothing compared to the psychological endurance required to live in my parents' house. My silence began to unnerve my father. He expected tears. He expected slammed doors and teenage demands. Instead, he got a ghost. He got a daughter who woke up before the sun earned her own keep and never once complained about the manufactured poverty he had forced upon her. I watched him from the kitchen island as he paced the length of the living room. Savannah was sitting on the sofa unboxing a fresh delivery of imported skincare products that my father had quietly paid for. He glared at her, then glanced at me in my stained work apron. The cognitive dissonance was cracking his composure. He did not know how to handle prey that refused to run. He had built a cage of financial scarcity, but I was treating the cage like a training ground. As the calendar flipped into October, his pacing became more frequent. He started taking phone calls in the backyard, his voice sharp and rushed. I knew why. Apex Hospitality Group was growing impatient. Corporations deal in strict deadlines. Marcus, the lead negotiator with the gravel voice, had drawn a hard line in the sand. They wanted the commercial zoning permits filed before the winter freeze. To do that, they needed the deed transferred the first week of November. Specifically, they demanded the finalized, signed paperwork by Friday. My 18th birthday was on Thursday. The timeline was razor thin. My father had to deliver a clean title less than 24 hours after I became a legal adult. He was out of runway. His strategy of starving me into submission had failed, which meant he would have to resort to his backup plan. He would have to place the fraudulent documents in front of me and risk the exposure. The pressure inside the Pacific Heights townhouse reached a boiling point on the Sunday before my birthday. My mother decided to host a mandatory family dinner. She ordered expensive catering from a downtown bistro, plating the food on our fine china to maintain the illusion of domestic grace. The dining room felt like a pressurized cabin. The only sounds were the scrape of silver forks against porcelain and the ticking of the antique clock in the hallway. Savannah picked at her roasted vegetables, scrolling on her phone under the table. My mother drank 2 glasses of red wine in rapid succession. My father sat at the head of the table, his jaw locked tight. He kept looking at me. His eyes were dark, calculating, and desperate. He set his knife down. The loud clatter made Savannah jump. "You have been working a lot of hours at that cafe, Ellie," he said. His tone was tight, lacking any of its usual polish. I swallowed my food and looked up. "I have to pay for my senior year, Dad. You said the accounts were empty." A muscle feathered in his cheek. He hated having his own lies quoted back to him. "I am handling the accounts," he snapped. "You do not need to humiliate this family by scrubbing floors in public. We have a plan in motion to clear the board." He leaned forward, placing both hands flat on the mahogany table. The charming patriarch was gone. The desperate gambler had taken his place. "I have a stack of routine tax documents for you to review this week," he said. His voice dropped to a low, commanding register. "They are related to your grandfather's estate. We need to finalize the transition before your birthday party on Thursday. You will sign them, and this entire financial crisis will be over. Do you understand me?" I looked at the man who was prepared to forge away my future. I looked at the mother who poured another glass of wine and stared at the wall. I looked at the sister who was waiting for her $2 million payout. "I understand perfectly, Dad," I said. I took another bite of my dinner. The clock in the hallway ticked away another second. The trap was set. All I had to do was wait for him to hand me the pen. My father did not let the dust settle after our tense Sunday dinner. He struck the very next evening. It was Monday, 3 days before my 18th birthday. I had just returned from a closing shift at the cafe. I was exhausted. My hands smelled like industrial sanitizer and stale espresso. I wanted nothing more than to walk up the stairs and sleep. But my father intercepted me in the foyer. He was wearing a crisp white dress shirt with the sleeves rolled up to his elbows. He looked like a man who was working late to secure his family's future. He held a thick manila folder in his left hand. He offered a warm, tired smile. He asked me to step into his study for just a moment. I followed him into the room. The heavy mahogany doors clicked shut behind us. The only light came from the brass lamp on his desk. He opened the manila folder and spread a stack of stapled papers across the leather blotter. "These are the routine tax documents I mentioned at dinner," he said. His voice was smooth and practiced. "We just need to finalize your transition to legal adulthood. It is mostly bureaucratic red tape regarding the estate." He handed me a heavy brass pen. Then he did something very calculated. He placed his left hand flat over the top half of the first page. He blocked the dense paragraphs of legal jargon, leaving only the bottom signature line exposed. "Just sign right here on the bottom line, Ellie," he said. "We can get this filed with the county tomorrow and put this whole financial nightmare behind us." I looked down at the paper. My father was a smart man, but he underestimated my training. Grandpa Thomas had spent 2 years teaching me how to scan a legal contract. You do not look at the signature line. You look at the margins. You look at the capitalized terms buried in the subclauses. Even with his hand covering the primary text, my eyes caught a sequence of bold words near the bottom margin. "Release of interest." I shifted my gaze to the second page peeking out from underneath. Quitclaim. I looked at the final page in the stack. Waiver of beneficiary rights. My heart began to hammer against my ribs. The blood rushed in my ears. This was not a routine tax filing. This was a total surrender. A quitclaim deed is a legal instrument used to transfer interest in real estate. A waiver of beneficiary rights meant I was legally stepping away from the irrevocable trust. If I signed those papers, I was handing my father the keys to the $14 million kingdom. I was giving him the legal authority to bulldoze the vines, sell the dirt to Apex Hospitality Group, and leave me with nothing. Evelyn Vance had warned me this exact moment would come. I remembered her strict instructions: do not sign, but do not tip him off. I held the brass pen. I let my hand hover over the paper. My father watched me, his breath shallow with anticipation. He was seconds away from securing his payday. I pulled my hand back. I set the pen down on the desk. I reached up and rubbed my temples, squeezing my eyes shut. I let out a long, pained sigh. "I have a terrible migraine, Dad," I whispered. My voice sounded weak and fragile. "The fluorescent lights at the cafe have been blinding me all night. I cannot focus on these numbers right now. The words are blurring together." My father stiffened. The warm paternal mask slipped for a fraction of a second, revealing the desperate gambler underneath. "It will take 2 seconds, Ellie," he urged. His tone clipped the edge of irritation. "Just sign your name and you can go to sleep." I kept my hands away from the desk. I shook my head slowly. "You always told me never to sign a financial document without reading it first," I said, weaponizing his own fake parenting advice against him. "I want to read them properly when my head stops pounding. I promise I will do it first thing tomorrow morning." He stared at me. He calculated his next move. If he pushed too hard, he would shatter the illusion of this being a routine tax filing. If he forced the pen into my hand, he would trigger suspicion. He needed my willing signature to satisfy the developers. He forced a tight smile. "Of course, sweetheart," he said. "Get some rest. We will handle it in the morning." I thanked him and walked out of the study. I climbed the stairs to my bedroom, locked the door, and waited in the dark. I waited until 2 in the morning. The townhouse was dead quiet. The ambient glow of the city streetlights filtered through the hallway windows. I slipped out of my room wearing only socks so my footsteps would make no sound on the hardwood floors. I crept down the staircase, pausing at the 4th step because I knew it creaked. I reached the ground floor and moved toward the study. The door was closed but unlocked. I eased it open and slipped inside. The manila folder was still sitting on the leather blotter right where we had left it. My father was so confident in his manipulation that he did not even bother locking the papers in his safe. He truly believed I was just a tired teenager with a headache. I pulled my phone from my pocket. I turned the screen brightness down to the lowest setting. I disabled the camera flash. I opened the folder. I photographed every single page of the fraudulent documents. I made sure the lighting caught the crisp black text of the quitclaim deed. I captured the waiver of beneficiary rights. I captured the indemnification clause that protected my father from any future legal retaliation. It was a masterpiece of corporate theft. I opened my encrypted email application. I attached the high-resolution images and sent them directly to Evelyn Vance. I sat in my father's desk chair and waited in the dark. My phone vibrated 12 minutes later. Evelyn was awake. Her message was short and surgical. She confirmed my worst fears. The documents were ironclad. If a pen touched those signature lines, the generations skipping trust would be legally severed. My father would become the sole executor of the estate. He could authorize the sale to Apex Hospitality the very same day. Evelyn sent a second message. "We need to delay him until Thursday midnight. Do not let him file those papers." I locked my phone and slipped it back into my pocket. I looked at the pristine stack of legal documents on the desk. I needed a way to delay the signing without raising my father's suspicions. I could not use another headache. I could not simply refuse. I needed an act of God, or an act of calculated clumsiness. I left the papers on the desk and crept back upstairs to get a few hours of sleep. Tuesday morning arrived with a cold gray fog rolling over the San Francisco hills. I woke up at 6. I put on my cafe uniform. I walked downstairs to the kitchen. My father usually woke up at 7. I had a narrow window. I prepared a large French press of dark roast coffee. I poured a full steaming mug. I carried the mug down the hall and into the study. I retrieved the manila folder from the desk. I carried it back to the kitchen and placed it on the white marble island right next to my backpack. I arranged the document so the signature pages were fanned out near the edge of the counter. I heard footsteps on the stairs. My father was awake. He walked into the kitchen wearing a silk robe, checking his phone. He looked up expecting to see me, eager to sign his papers. "Good morning, Ellie," he said. "Ready to get that paperwork out of the way?" I turned toward him holding the heavy ceramic mug of coffee. I offered a bright, tired smile. "Yes, Dad," I said. "Let me just grab a pen." I shifted my weight. I twisted my wrist just a fraction of an inch. I let the ceramic mug slip from my fingers. The mug shattered against the marble island. Boiling dark roast coffee exploded across the counter. The dark liquid washed over the fanned-out legal documents in a tidal wave of heat and ruined ink. I gasped, jumping back, acting entirely horrified. "Oh my gosh," I cried out, grabbing a handful of paper towels. "I am so sorry, Dad. It just slipped." My father rushed forward. His face was a portrait of pure, unbridled panic. He snatched the documents from the puddle of coffee, but it was too late. The heavy bond paper was soaked through. The printer ink was bleeding across the pages, turning the precise legal jargon into illegible black smears. The signature lines were completely destroyed. No county recorder would accept a document in this condition. He stood there holding the dripping papers. His jaw clenched so tight I thought his teeth might crack. He wanted to scream. I could see the rage simmering just behind his eyes. But he could not scream. A loving father does not rage over a spilled cup of coffee on routine tax forms. I kept blotting the counter, keeping my head down, playing the clumsy, overworked teenager. "I am so sorry," I repeated. "I was just rushing for my morning shift. I have a double shift today and 2 exams tomorrow. I am just so tired." He threw the ruined documents into the stainless steel sink. He took a deep breath, forcing his heart rate down. He deployed his fake patient smile. "Accidents happen, Ellie," he said. His voice was strained tight as a piano wire. I looked at him with wide, apologetic eyes. "Just print fresh copies," I said. "I will not have a free second to breathe until Thursday anyway." "Why do we not just sign them at my birthday party on Thursday night? We can do it right before we cut the cake. It will be a nice way to celebrate becoming an adult." My father looked in the ruined papers in the sink. He looked at the calendar on the wall. Thursday night. The Apex developers were attending the party. If I signed the papers in front of the buyers, it would serve as the ultimate show of good faith. It would guarantee the deal. He thought a public setting would guarantee my compliance. He thought a party surrounded by wealthy guests would pressure me into signing without a fuss. He believed he was still in control of the board. "That sounds perfect, sweetheart," he said smoothly. "We will do it Thursday night." He turned and walked out of the kitchen to change his clothes. I stood alone in the quiet room. I dropped the wet paper towels into the trash can. The trap was officially primed. The clock was ticking toward midnight. Wednesday morning arrived with a fleet of commercial catering vans blocking our driveway. Delivery workers in matching uniforms carried crates of crystal glassware through the front door. Floral arrangers hauled towering centerpieces of white orchids into the dining room, placing them carefully on the mahogany table. Our Pacific Heights townhouse was being transformed. My parents were not preparing for a birthday party. They were staging a corporate mixer disguised as a family celebration. I stood near the kitchen island, drinking a glass of water before my shift at the cafe, watching the chaos unfold. My mother was speaking to the head caterer, pointing at a clipboard with sharp, manicured taps. She demanded that the champagne be kept at a precise temperature. She instructed the waitstaff to circulate the hors d'oeuvres continuously so the guests would never have an empty hand. My father was standing near the front windows, speaking quietly into his cell phone. I moved closer, keeping my footsteps light against the hardwood floor. I heard him say the name Marcus. "Yes, Marcus," my father said, smoothing the lapel of his tailored suit. "Everything is aligned for tomorrow evening. The final paperwork will be executed during the event. We are making a celebration out of the transition. It will be a very clean handover." He laughed at something the Apex hospitality developer said on the other end of the line. It was a rich, confident sound. He was standing on the edge of a $14 million finish line, convinced he had already won the race. The ruined documents in the kitchen sink were just a minor speed bump. He had already printed fresh copies. They were locked inside the wall safe in his study, waiting for the ink of my signature. Savannah walked down the stairs wearing a silk robe and holding a steaming cup of matcha. She ignored the catering staff swarming the hallway. She looked at me standing near the kitchen. "You should probably figure out what you are wearing tomorrow, Ellie," she said, her tone dripping with passive condescension. "Dad invited some very important venture capitalists. You cannot wear those faded denim jackets of yours. Try to look like you belong in this family for one night." I offered her a tight, polite smile. "I will find something nice, Savannah," I replied. She turned away, already bored with the conversation, dialing her stylist on her phone. She was treating my 18th birthday like a personal networking event for her imaginary lifestyle brand. She was ready to spend the $2 million cut my father had promised her. I put my glass in the dishwasher, grabbed my backpack, and left for work. I spent my final day as a miner wiping down sticky tables and steaming milk at the coffee shop. The manual labor kept my mind focused. It kept my heart rate steady. When my shift ended, I walked the 6 blocks back to the townhouse. The sun had set. The city was glowing with streetlights and cold fog. The house was quiet when I returned. The caterers had finished their setup and gone home for the night. The orchids cast long shadows against the walls. My parents were asleep. I climbed the stairs to my bedroom and locked the door. I did not turn on the overhead lights. I sat on the edge of my mattress in the dark. The glowing red digits of my digital alarm clock read 10:30, 1 hour and 30 minutes left until midnight. The silence of the house pressed against my ears. This was the space where the adrenaline faded and the reality of the situation settled into my bones. I thought about the man sleeping down the hall. I thought about the woman who brought me into the world. For years I had blamed myself for their indifference. I thought I was too quiet. I thought I lacked the social grace they valued so highly. I spent my childhood trying to figure out how to mold myself into a daughter they could be proud of. I thought if I just worked hard enough, if I learned the agricultural business inside and out, they would eventually look at me the way they looked at Savannah. Sitting in the dark, I finally understood the truth. They were never going to see me. I was mourning the parents I wished I had, while simultaneously preparing to destroy the ones I actually got. It is a strange, hollow kind of grief. You mourn the dead once, and you bury them in the earth. But you mourn the living every single day they choose greed over your existence. My parents did not hate me. Hate requires passion. Hate requires a deep emotional investment. They were simply indifferent to me. I was a stepping stone. I was a legal signature standing between them and a $14 million check. They were willing to trade my future, my grandfather's legacy, and my financial security just to maintain their country club facade. I stopped crying for them months ago. The tears had dried up and turned into something much harder, something clinical. I reached under my pillow and pulled out my laptop. I opened the screen. The cold blue light illuminated my face. The clock in the corner of the screen read 11:45. I opened my encrypted email. Evelyn Vance had sent a secure link earlier in the afternoon. The subject line was blank. I clicked the link. A portal opened on my screen demanding a 2-factor authentication code. I typed in the sequence Evelyn had provided during our meeting in her office. The screen refreshed, loading a dense, highly secure legal document. It was the acceptance of successor beneficiary form for the Thomas Foster Generations Skipping Irrevocable Trust. I scrolled through the pages. The legal jargon was precise and unforgiving. It detailed the transfer of the 40-acre Sonoma vineyard, the agricultural equipment, the operational accounts, and the physical structures. It listed the exact parcel numbers. It outlined my new fiduciary responsibilities. By signing this document, I was legally claiming the estate. I was locking the doors from the inside. The clock turned to 11:55. My heart beat a slow, steady rhythm against my ribs. I thought about my grandfather sitting in his leather chair teaching me how to test the soil acidity. I thought about the way the wind sounded blowing through the Cabernet vines at sunset. He had spent his entire life building a sanctuary from the dirt up. He had placed it in my hands because he knew I would not sell it to the highest bidder, 1158. I moved the cursor to the bottom of the document. A digital signature box waited for my input. 11:59. I thought about my father standing in the foyer tomorrow night holding his breath, waiting for me to sign his forged quitclaim deed in front of the corporate developers. He thought he was the smartest man in the room. He thought the board belonged to him. 12 midnight. The date on my computer shifted. Thursday. I was 18 years old. My father's conservatorship evaporated into thin air. He no longer had any legal authority over my welfare, my signature, or my assets. I typed my full legal name into the signature box. Eliza Catherine Foster. I clicked submit. The screen froze for a fraction of a second, processing the encryption, and then a green check mark appeared. The document was executed. The trust was mine. The $14 million property belonged entirely to a teenager sitting in the dark in Pacific Heights. A new email arrived in my inbox less than 10 seconds later. It was from Evelyn Vance. The message contained only 2 sentences. I have the executed file. The list pendants will be recorded the second the county clerk unlocks the doors at 8 in the morning. I closed the laptop. The room went pitch black. I laid back against my pillows and pulled the heavy quilt over my shoulders. My muscles relaxed for the first time in 90 days. The psychological warfare was over. The trap was armed. The tripwire was set. I closed my eyes. A genuine, quiet smile spread across my face. Tomorrow night, the caterers would pour expensive champagne. Tomorrow night, the corporate developers would wear their best suits. Tomorrow night, my father would hand me a brass pen in front of a room full of millionaires entirely unaware that the dirt beneath his feet was already gone. The string quartet positioned near the foyer played a classical arrangement of a modern pop song. The townhouse hummed with the low murmur of 50 wealthy guests. Waiters in crisp white shirts navigated the crowded living room, carrying silver trays of seared scallops and crystal flutes of champagne. My parents had spared no expense. They hired a lighting director to cast a warm, flattering glow across the dining area. They commissioned a sprawling ice sculpture shaped like a blooming grapevine for the center table. It was a beautiful, hollow display of wealth funded entirely by credit and the anticipation of a $14 million payout. I stood near the perimeter of the room, holding a glass of sparkling cider. I wore a simple navy dress. I kept my posture relaxed. I watched the ecosystem of the party function exactly as my father designed it. Savannah was holding court near the fireplace. She held a glass of rosé and pitched her upcoming lifestyle brand to a circle of my father's associates. They nodded politely, their eyes glazing over, humoring her, because they wanted a piece of the Apex hospitality deal. My mother glided between groups of wives, offering tight smiles and accepting compliments on the floral arrangements. Then there was my father. David Foster was in his element. He moved through the crowd with the effortless grace of a man who believed he held all the winning cards. He shook hands, he patted shoulders, he laughed at jokes that were not funny. He caught my eye from across the room and gestured for me to join him. I walked through the sea of designer gowns and tailored suits. My father wrapped a heavy arm around my shoulders. He turned me toward a man standing near the ice sculpture. "Ellie," my father said, his voice projecting just loud enough for the immediate circle to hear. "I want to introduce you to someone very important. This is Marcus. He is the lead acquisitions director for Apex Hospitality Group." I looked at Marcus. He did not look like a man who attended birthday parties. He wore a dark charcoal suit that hung perfectly on his frame. His watch caught the light, flashing a brand that costs more than a luxury sedan. His eyes were cold, assessing, and entirely devoid of warmth. He looked at me the same way he probably looked at the topography reports of my grandfather's farm. I was just a minor variable in his equation. "Happy birthday, Eliza," Marcus said. His voice was the same crushed gravel sound I heard through the study door weeks ago. 18 is a significant milestone. It is the age where we put away childhood things and start thinking about building a real future. He was speaking in code. He was telling me to let go of the dirt. "Thank you, Marcus," I replied. My voice was smooth and polite. I am learning a lot about how the real world operates lately. Marcus smiled. It did not reach his eyes. Your father is a sharp negotiator. You are in very good hands. Apex is looking forward to a very seamless transition this week. We have big plans for the Sonoma parcel. It is going to elevate the entire valley. I kept my expression blank. I did not mention the vines. I did not mention the generations of labor poured into that soil. I just nodded and took a sip of my cider. A few minutes later, the string quartet stopped playing. My father picked up a silver spoon and tapped it against the side of his champagne flute. The sharp ringing sound cut through the chatter. The room quieted down. The guests turned their attention to the center of the living room. My father stood tall, holding his glass raised. The lighting caught his silver hair, making him look dignified and wise. Thank you all for being here tonight, he began. His voice resonated with practiced authority. We are gathered to celebrate a very special milestone. My youngest daughter, Eliza, officially steps into adulthood today. A polite round of applause rippled through the crowd. I stood beside him, keeping my eyes fixed on the ice sculpture. But tonight is about more than just a birthday, my father continued. It is about legacy. My father, Thomas, built an incredible foundation in Sonoma. He loved that land. He loved the history it held. But history is only valuable if it serves the future. He paused, letting the silence hang in the air. He was a master of the theatrical pause. To honor his memory, our family has made the collective decision to transition our assets. We are stepping away from the past and partnering with some incredible visionaries to secure a bright, modernized future for the next generation. He raised his glass toward Marcus. Marcus tipped his head in a silent acknowledgement. To Eliza, my father said, his voice swelling with fake emotion. And to the future, the crowd echoed. 50 crystal glasses clinked together. They drank to the destruction of my grandfather's life work. They drank to a theft disguised as a business transaction. As the applause died down and the string quartet resumed playing, my father leaned down close to my ear. His arm tightened around my shoulder, transforming the embrace into a physical restraint. He reached inside the breast pocket of his suit jacket. He pulled out a fresh, pristine copy of the quitclaim deed and the waiver of beneficiary rights. The pages were folded neatly. He handed me the same heavy brass pen he tried to force on me 3 days ago. Let us make it official, sweetheart, he whispered. The cameras are watching. Marcus is watching. Just sign the bottom page and you can go back to enjoying your party. It was his ultimate strategy. He weaponized the social pressure of the room. He knew I hated causing scenes. He assumed a quiet, obedient teenager would never dare to disrupt a high society gala. He thought the sheer weight of 50 staring guests and a corporate buyer would crush any lingering hesitation I had. He held the papers out. The brass pen gleamed in his hand. I looked at the documents. I looked at the pen. Then I looked up into my father's eyes. I did not shrink away. I did not break eye contact. I reached out and took my glass of sparkling cider from the nearby table. I took a slow, deliberate sip. I let the silence stretch between us, stretching so tight I could feel his pulse jump in his jaw. Let us handle business on Monday, Dad, I said. My voice was low, carrying just enough volume for him and Marcus to hear. Today is about family. I do not want to ruin the celebration with tax forms. My father froze. The paternal mask cracked, but it did not shatter. He was trapped by his own public facade. He could not yell at me. He could not grab my wrist and force the pen into my fingers. Not here. Not in front of the venture capitalists he needed to impress. Not in front of the Apex hospitality director who required a willing signature, not a coerced one. I used the cage he built for me and locked him inside it. I saw the calculation run behind his eyes. He checked the mental timeline. Apex demanded the finalized paperwork by Friday afternoon. Tomorrow. If he pushed me right now, I might cause a scene and spook the buyers. If he let it go, he could corner me tomorrow morning when the guests were gone and the house was empty. He could use whatever threats necessary behind closed doors before driving to the county recorder. He inhaled sharply through his nose. He slipped the documents and the pen back into his suit jacket. "Of course, Ellie," he said. His voice was a tight, suffocated rasp. "We will handle it first thing tomorrow morning, before breakfast." He turned away from me, forcing a wide smile as a guest approached to compliment the catering. I walked away from the center of the room. I moved toward the dessert table where a towering chocolate cake sat untouched. I picked up a small plate and a silver fork. My mother found me a few minutes later. She looked agitated, noting the tension radiating from my father across the room. She asked me if everything was all right. I told her the party was beautiful and that I was just enjoying the music. She accepted the lie and walked away to refill her wine glass. I stood in the corner of the lavish dining room eating my cake, watching the wealthy guests celebrate a real estate deal that no longer existed. My father was counting on tomorrow morning. He was planning the threats he would hurl at me across the kitchen island. He was calculating the driving time to the county recorder. He truly believed he still controlled the board. He had no idea that the game ended hours ago. He had no idea that in less than 12 hours, he would march into the municipal building with his forged backup plan slided across a clerk's desk and discover that the $14 million dirt he promised the devil belonged entirely to me. I left the townhouse at 4 in the morning. The catering crew had cleared out hours ago. The floral arrangements were already wilting in the dining room. My parents were trapped in a deep champagne-induced sleep. They had celebrated their imaginary payday until 2 in the morning, toasting to their own brilliance. I packed a single canvas duffel bag, walked out the front door, and caught the first bus heading north across the bridge. By 7:30, I was standing on the wraparound porch of the Sonoma farmhouse. The morning air was sharp and smelled like wet cedar and damp earth. I held a ceramic mug of black coffee, watching the coastal fog roll off the Mayacamas Mountains and settle over the rows of Cabernet vines. The estate was silent. It was a heavy, enduring kind of quiet. I was 18 years old. I was standing on my own dirt. For the first time in my life, I did not feel like a guest in someone else's narrative. I felt rooted. Grandpa Thomas used to sit in this exact spot on the porch. He always said that farming was an exercise in patience. You plant the seed, you tend the soil, and you wait for the season to turn. You cannot rush the harvest. You just have to outlast the weather. I had outlasted my parents. While I was watching the fog lift in wine country, my father was walking into the municipal building in downtown San Francisco. It was 7:55. He was running on pure adrenaline and hubris. He had spent the early hours of the morning sitting at his mahogany desk, meticulously tracing my signature onto the fresh quitclaim deed. He rationalized the forgery in his own mind. He believed he was saving the family from financial ruin. He thought the end justified the means, and he assumed a quiet, obedient teenager would never have the resources to audit a municipal filing. He met the Apex Hospitality Group legal team in the lobby of the recorder's office. Marcus, the lead acquisitions director, stood near the metal detectors, flanked by 2 junior attorneys. They wore tailored wool coats and carried matching leather briefcases. They moved with the synchronized arrogance of men who traded earth for concrete. My father shook their hands warmly. He held the manila envelope containing the forged deed tight against his chest. They rode the elevator to the second floor. The municipal office was a stark contrast to the luxury high-rises where these men usually operated. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead. The linoleum floors were scuffed. The air smelled of stale coffee and old paper. My father did not care about the aesthetics. He only cared about the finish line. At exactly 8 o'clock, the metal security grate rolled up. The county clerks opened their windows. My father approached counter number 4. The clerk was a woman wearing a gray cardigan and wire-rimmed glasses. She did not care about designer suits or $14 million deals. She cared about parcel numbers and proper filing procedures. She was the gatekeeper of the county records. My father slid the manila envelope across the counter. He offered his most charming, persuasive smile. "Good morning," my father said. "We are opening escrow this afternoon on a commercial transfer. I just need to record this deed and waive the minor beneficiary rights. Standard family estate transition." The clerk took the paperwork without returning his smile. She pulled the forged quitclaim deed from the envelope. She typed the 12-digit parcel identification number into her terminal. The keyboard clacked. Marcus stood right behind my father, checking his expensive watch. The Apex attorneys exchanged quiet, satisfied nods. They were minutes away from locking down the most lucrative hospitality site in Northern California. The clerk stopped typing. She squinted at her monitor. A bright red prompt had appeared on her screen. She clicked her mouse twice, reading the digital addendum attached to the property record. She gathered the forged papers, squared the edges on the counter, and slid them back toward my father. "I cannot record this deed, sir," she said. Her voice was flat-bored and entirely unbothered by the wealth standing in front of her. My father chuckled. It was a nervous, patronizing sound. "I think there must be a typo in your system. The estate taxes are paid in full. The property is clear." "The property is not clear," the clerk replied, looking him in the eyes. "The title is locked under a generation-skipping irrevocable trust. Furthermore, a lease pendants was filed on this exact parcel 20 minutes ago by an attorney named Evelyn Vance. The title is frozen." My father felt the floor drop out from underneath him. The blood drained from his face, leaving his skin a pale, sickly gray. His charming smile collapsed. "That is impossible," he stammered, gripping the edge of the counter. "I am the legal conservator of the estate. My daughter is a minor. I have the judicial authority to authorize this transfer. There is no attorney named Evelyn Vance associated with our family." The clerk looked at the birth date registered on the trust documents displayed on her screen. She looked back at my father. "According to the trust charter recorded this morning, the successor beneficiary turned 18 yesterday," she said. "Your conservatorship is void. She assumed full legal control at midnight. You have no legal standing to transfer this deed. Next in line, please." Marcus stepped forward. The slick corporate warmth he had displayed at my birthday party vanished instantly. His eyes turned into flint. Apex Hospitality Group did not tolerate amateur mistakes. They did not play games with clouded titles. Marcus realized instantly what had just happened. My father had signed a preliminary purchase agreement guaranteeing a clean title. He had sworn on official corporate documents that the property was free of any heir disputes or trust encumbrances. He had taken earnest money based on a lie. "You forged a deed," Marcus said. His voice was barely above a whisper, making it infinitely more terrifying than a shout. "You promised us unencumbered land you did not legally possess. You lied to my board of directors." David, one of the junior attorneys, said, stepping away, as if my father was contagious. "You just committed felony fraud." My father stumbled backward away from the counter. The bustling noise of the municipal office faded into a dull, rushing sound in his ears. He pulled his cell phone from his suit pocket. His hands shook so badly he almost dropped the device on the linoleum floor. He bypassed his contacts and dialed my number from memory. I was still standing on the porch in Sonoma. I watched a hawk circle over the tree line, riding the morning thermals. My phone vibrated in my canvas jacket pocket. I pulled it out and looked at the caller ID. I let it ring 3 times. I wanted him to sweat. I wanted him to feel the exact same helplessness he had tried to force on me for the last 3 months. I answered the call. "Hello, Dad," I said. "What did you do?" He breathed into the receiver. He was hyperventilating in the hallway of the municipal building. "Eliza, what did you do?" "I handled business, Dad," I said. My voice was calm and measured. "Just like I promised. You ruined us." He hissed, his voice cracking with panic. "You have no idea what you just triggered. Apex will sue me into the ground. They will take the townhouse. They will take the cars. They will take everything. Tell this lawyer to drop the hold. Tell her right now." He was still giving orders. He was standing in the ashes of his own hubris, and he still thought he could command me. I took a sip of my coffee. I looked out at the 40 acres of pristine vineyards that my grandfather had cultivated with his bare hands. I thought about the tech startups my father had driven into the ground. I thought about the millions of dollars he had squandered trying to look important in a city that did not care about him. "Did you really think Grandpa would leave his legacy to a man who could not even keep a startup afloat?" I asked. The line went dead silent. The words cut through the phone like glass. He spent his entire life building a foundation. I continued, my tone dropping to a cold, unforgiving register. You spent your life looking for a bailout. You thought I was just the quiet kid in the corner. You thought you could starve me out and forge my name. You forgot who raised me. I ended the call. I did not wait for his response. I blocked his number, slipped the phone back into my pocket, and walked down the wooden porch steps toward the vines. The waiting was over. The war had officially begun. I rode the southbound bus back to San Francisco late that morning. I had stood on the Sonoma porch and felt the dirt beneath my boots, but my physical life was still boxed up in the city. My computer, my winter coats, and the hard copies of my legal armor were sitting in my bedroom. I also knew my father was heading back to the townhouse. I wanted to be there when he arrived. I wanted to watch the illusion break in real time. I unlocked the front door of our Pacific Heights home just before noon. The living room was a graveyard of celebration. Half-empty champagne flutes littered the glass coffee tables. The towering white orchids were beginning to droop. The house smelled like stale wine and melted ice. My mother and sister were sitting at the marble kitchen island. They were nursing hangovers with imported sparkling water and lemon wedges. Savannah had her tablet propped up against a vase. She was scrolling through commercial lease options for her new wellness brand, spending the $2 million she thought was arriving on Monday. Victoria was rubbing her temples, complaining about the catering staff, leaving a stain on the dining room rug. Neither of them looked up when I walked into the kitchen. I poured myself a glass of tap water and stood near the sink. 10 minutes later, the heavy oak front door hit the interior wall with a loud wooden crack. My father walked into the foyer. He did not look like the confident patriarch who had raised a glass to the future the night before. His suit jacket was slung over his arm. His silk tie was pulled loose. His face was a sickly pale gray, shining with a thin layer of cold sweat. He walked straight into the kitchen, his chest heaving with shallow, erratic breaths. Victoria lowered her sparkling water. She recognized the panic in his posture immediately. "David," she said. Her voice was sharp. "What is wrong? Where are the Apex representatives?" My father did not look at her. He stopped in the center of the kitchen and pointed a trembling finger directly at me. "She killed it," he said. His voice was a hollow, breathless rasp. "The deal is dead." Savannah stopped scrolling on her tablet. The kitchen went dead quiet. The only sound was the low hum of the stainless steel refrigerator. "What are you talking about?" Victoria demanded, standing up from her stool. "She locked the title," my father said, taking a step toward me. He looked like a man who was watching his own house burn to the foundation. "She filed a legal hold on the property at 8 o'clock this morning." Apex walked away from the counter. "They are threatening to sue me for breach of contract. We have nothing." The silence that followed was heavier than anything I had ever experienced in that house. I watched my mother process the information. I watched the realization wash over her face, turning her features rigid. The polite maternal mask she had worn for 18 years dissolved into thin air. There was no more fake sympathy. There were no more gentle smiles. She walked around the marble island and stopped 3 feet away from me. Her eyes were cold and dark. "You selfish, ungrateful child," Victoria said. The venom in her voice was pure and unrefined. "We gave you everything. We fed you. We put a roof over your head. We maintained a lifestyle so you could have a future in this city, and you throw it all away for a patch of dirt. You are destroying your own family." I did not flinch. I did not lower my gaze. "You did not secure a future for me, Mom," I said quietly. "You secured a future for your country club memberships. You were going to steal my inheritance to pay off credit card debt." My father stepped forward, his fists clenched at his sides. He was vibrating with a toxic mix of fear and rage. "You think you are so smart, Ellie," he sneered. "You think you won a game of chess. You are an 18-year-old girl with no high school diploma and no money. You do not know how the real world works. I am still your father. I will throw you out on the street today with the clothes on your back. You will have no car, no college fund, and no family. You will be begging me to let you come back inside by midnight." He was relying on the old dynamic. He thought he still controlled my survival. He thought the threat of poverty would force me to undo the legal hold. I set my glass of water down on the granite counter. The clink of the glass echoed in the quiet room. I reached into my canvas backpack and pulled out a thick manila folder. Evelyn Vance had prepared it for me the day before. I untied the string closure and pulled out a stack of paper. I placed it flat on the kitchen island, right on top of Savannah's tablet. "I do not need your college fund, Dad," I said. My voice was even and precise. I slid the first document toward him. It was a certified copy of the irrevocable trust bearing the official county seal. "I own the 40 acres in Sonoma," I continued. "I own the farm equipment. I own the harvest yields. I own the farmhouse." I slid the second document forward. It was the lis pendens notice filed at 8 in the morning, legally freezing the parcel. But I did not just read the trust documents, I said, looking my father directly in the eyes. I read the operational ledgers. I audited the farm accounts. My father stopped breathing. The vein in his neck pulsed. "For the last 3 years," I said, keeping my tone clinical, "Grandpa Thomas allowed you limited access to the vineyard operating accounts to manage payroll while his health declined. But you did not just pay the field workers. You siphoned money to cover the margins on your failing venture capital portfolios. You were treating the farm like a private slush fund long before Grandpa died." Victoria turned to look at her husband. Her eyes widened. "David," she whispered, "what is she talking about?" My father did not answer her. He was staring at the manila folder like it was a live explosive. As the sole successor beneficiary, I said I assumed fiduciary control at midnight. At 8:15 this morning, my attorney froze all associated bank accounts. "You no longer have access to the routing numbers. The cash flow is cut." The power dynamic in the room shifted so violently you could almost feel the air pressure change. My father was not just a man who lost a real estate deal. He was a man who had lost his secret lifeline. He was drowning, and I had just removed his only life vest. Savannah stood up from her stool. She recognized that the ship was sinking, and she defaulted to the only survival tactic she knew. She tried to play the victim. She tried to manipulate the emotional temperature of the room. "Ellie, please," Savannah pleaded. Her voice was soft, trembling with manufactured tears. "You cannot do this. You are tearing us apart. We are your family. We were just trying to survive. If you cut off the accounts, I lose my investors. I lose my brand. We all lose everything. Do not do this to me." I looked at my older sister. I thought about her painting pink price tags on my grandfather's antique clock. I thought about her pretending to care about my stress during our spa day in Napa. "I am not a venture capital firm, Savannah," I said. "Find another angel investor to fund your delusion." She flinched as if I had struck her. She opened her mouth to argue, but no words came out. She looked at our parents for backup, but David was staring at the floor and Victoria was staring at David. The facade was broken. There was no more pretend wealth to hide behind. I turned my back on them. I walked up the hardwood stairs to my bedroom. I did not rush. I took my time. I packed my laptop, my heavy winter clothes, and my work boots into a single canvas duffel bag. I left the designer dresses my mother had bought me hanging in the closet. I left the expensive jewelry sitting in its velvet box. I only took what I needed to run a farm. When I walked back downstairs, my parents were still standing in the kitchen. They were arguing in hushed, vicious whispers. The blame game had already started. The foundation of their marriage was built on money, and the money was gone. I walked out the front door. I did not look back, and I did not say goodbye. The San Francisco air felt different as I stepped onto the sidewalk. It felt lighter. I walked 3 blocks to the corner, hailed a city taxi, and told the driver to take me to the rental car agency near the transit hub. An hour later, I was driving a practical 4-wheel drive truck north across the Golden Gate Bridge. I merged onto the highway heading toward wine country. I was leaving behind a townhouse filled with ghosts and imported furniture. I was heading toward a house filled with dirt and history. I knew the war was far from over. I knew my father would face the wrath of the Apex Hospitality Group. I knew the corporate lawyers would soon begin tearing his life apart to recover their lost time and penalties. But as I drove past the rolling green hills of Sonoma, watching the sun break through the afternoon clouds, I felt a profound, overwhelming sense of peace. The dirt belonged to me, and I was going home. The farmhouse was freezing when I turned the key. Dust sheets covered the velvet sofas in the living room. The refrigerator held nothing but a box of baking soda. The silence echoed off the hardwood floors. It did not matter. I threw my canvas duffel bag onto the foot of Grandpa Thomas' old bed and slept for 12 hours straight. When I woke up, the real work began. I drove into town before sunrise. The sky was the color of bruised iron. I parked outside a small diner near the county line. I was looking for Mateo. He had been the head foreman of the Foster estate for 22 years. He knew the soil density of the South Ridge better than he knew his own reflection. My father had fired him 3 days after the funeral. David claimed Mateo was an unnecessary payroll expense. The truth was, my father wanted the property empty and unmonitored when the demolition crews arrived. I found Mateo sitting in a vinyl booth drinking black coffee. I slid a printed employment contract across the table. I told him I was reinstating his original salary backed by the trust. I also added a 10% equity stake in the upcoming harvest yield. He did not ask me about my parents. He read the signature on the bottom line, finished his coffee, and walked out to the passenger seat of my truck. Farming is not a romantic endeavor. It is an exercise in relentless crisis management. We spent the first 14 days undoing the neglect my father had allowed to rot the estate. We walked the property lines at dawn. We bled the main irrigation valves. We audited the chemical sheds and ordered fresh sulfur to prevent mildew from taking hold on the vines. I sat at the heavy oak desk in the office and balanced the ledgers. The operational accounts were healthy, but only because Evelyn Vance had locked the gates before my father could drain the quarterly reserves. I learned how to read a regional weather report the way a day trader reads the stock market ticker. Every drop of unexpected rain and every spike in temperature translated directly to the bottom line. I was running a $12 million agricultural enterprise. My fingernails were stained with dark soil. My boots were constantly caked in wet mud. I had never felt more powerful. In Sonoma County, news travels faster than a coastal wildfire. The local agricultural community operates as a tight, insular network of generational farmers. They despise corporate developers. They loathe the hospitality groups that buy up historic land to build infinity pools and wellness retreats. Within 10 days, the gossip reached every corner of the valley. Everyone from the local hardware store manager to the regional grape buyers knew what had happened in San Francisco. They knew David Foster had tried to pave over his own father's vines. They also knew his teenage daughter had pulled the emergency brake on the deal. When I walked into the agricultural supply store to purchase fertilizer, the older farmers standing near the register stopped talking. They looked at me. They did not ask intrusive questions. They did not offer hollow sympathy regarding my grandfather. The owner simply nodded his head, processed my payment, and helped me load the heavy bags into the bed of my truck. Respect is a quiet, unspoken currency out here. I was earning my place at their table. While I was building my empire in the dirt, my parents were watching their house of cards collapse in the city. 2 weeks after my 18th birthday, the corporate hammer swung down on Pacific Heights. Apex Hospitality Group was not a forgiving entity. They did not write off $14 million failures as bad luck. They demanded compensation for their wasted time, their stalled architectural plans, and their humiliated executives. Marcus and his legal team filed a crushing civil suit in the Superior Court. The complaint was ruthless and public. It alleged gross breach of contract and intentional misrepresentation of title. When my father signed the preliminary escrow agreements in September, he had legally guaranteed the property was unencumbered. He had sworn on official corporate documents that no trust disputes existed. He lied to a billion-dollar corporation. The penalty clauses hidden deep in the Apex contracts triggered automatically. They sued him for a staggering sum. The lawsuit sought to recover all legal expenses, the lost zoning permit application fees, and heavy punitive damages. My father was suddenly drowning in an ocean of corporate litigation. He had no venture capital funds left to shield him. He had no farm accounts to siphon. His credit lines were frozen. The panic manifested through my cell phone. I never answered his calls. I let every single ring go to voicemail. I kept a meticulous date-stamped audio log saved on a secure encrypted cloud drive. His tone swung back and forth like a violent pendulum. On a Tuesday evening, he left a message filled with blistering, venomous rage. He called me an ungrateful child. He threatened to drag me into probate court. He promised to file injunctions that would bleed the trust dry and leave the vineyard bankrupt. 2 days later, the tone shifted into pathetic, suffocating desperation. The veneer of the confident San Francisco elite was entirely stripped away. He sounded like a broken, terrified old man. He asked me to just lift the freeze on the operational accounts. He begged me to release a fraction of the capital so he could pay a retainer for a defense attorney. He swore he would pay me back with interest. He promised we could attend family counseling. He pleaded with me to remember that he was my father. I sat on the wraparound porch drinking coffee, listening to him cry through the small speaker of my phone. I felt nothing. The empathy well had run dry a long time ago. He was reaping the exact harvest he had planted. I forwarded the audio files directly to Evelyn Vance. She called me back an hour later. Her voice carried the sharp, clinical precision I had come to rely on over the last 3 months. Let him leave as many messages as he wants. Eliza Evelyn advised, do not engage, do not respond. He is legally documenting his own desperation. I asked her if he could actually drag the trust into civil court to access the funds. Evelyn let out a short, dry laugh. It was a sharp sound over the phone line. He cannot touch the generation-skipping trust, she said. Furthermore, his actions with Apex crossed the threshold from civil liability into criminal fraud. He knowingly signed a corporate document claiming title to land he did not legally possess. If he attempts to sue you for access to the accounts, we take the forged quitclaim deed and his escrow signatures straight to the district attorney. We hold the ultimate leverage. He is effectively neutralized. I thanked her and ended the call. The legal shield was impenetrable. My father could not reach me. But as I looked down the long gravel driveway leading to the main road, I realized the isolation of the farm was about to be broken. My father was trapped by his own arrogance, but he was not the only person losing their lifestyle in the city. The money had officially run out. And when the money dries up, the parasites start looking for a new host. The Pacific Heights townhouse was bleeding money, and the fallout was not contained to my father. When David lost his access to the agricultural accounts, the financial drought spread immediately to my sister. Savannah's entire identity was subsidized by the capital he siphoned from the dirt. Without his bridge loans, her lifestyle brand was nothing more than an expensive hobby. It took exactly 18 days for the reality of her new poverty to break her. I was standing near the tractor barn on a Tuesday afternoon reviewing the quarterly supply manifests with Mateo. The November air was sharp, carrying the scent of wood smoke from a neighboring farm. I heard the crunch of tires on the long gravel driveway before I saw the vehicle. It was not a commercial delivery truck. It was a ride-share sedan. Savannah stepped out of the back seat. The contrast between the woman who had tagged my grandfather's antiques with pink sticky notes and the woman standing in my driveway was striking. The curated confidence was gone. She was not wearing a tailored tracksuit or holding artisan coffee. She wore faded jeans, a plain gray sweater, and carried an oversized canvas tote bag that looked suspiciously heavy. She looked exhausted, pale, and entirely out of her element. She paid the driver and walked toward me. I handed the clipboard to Mateo and told him to start the inventory count in the south shed. He gave Savannah a brief appraising glance, nodded to me, and walked away. Ellie, Savannah said, her voice tight and nervous. I crossed my arms and waited. I did not offer a hug. I did not invite her into the farmhouse. Savannah looked around at the towering pines and the dormant vines stretching across the hills. It is so quiet out here, she murmured, shivering slightly in the cold air. I forgot how quiet it gets. What do you want, Savannah? I asked. My tone was neutral, lacking any of the hostility she likely expected. She dropped her heavy tote bag onto the gravel. She wrapped her arms around herself, adopting a posture of vulnerability. It was a calculated physical shift. It is a nightmare in the city, Ellie. She began, her eyes welling with tears. Dad is a wreck. The lawyers from Apex are tearing him apart. He is drinking all day. Mom will not leave her bedroom. The bank froze the primary checking account this morning. They are talking about putting a lien on the house. I kept my face perfectly still. I knew the corporate litigation would destroy him, but hearing the details did not trigger any sympathy. It was the logical consequence of a forged deed. It is so toxic in that house. Savannah continued, taking a step closer. The energy is suffocating. I cannot breathe there anymore. I realized something, Ellie. I realized how awful they have been to you, to us. They used us. Dad was just trying to use my brand to launder his own image, and he was trying to use you to pay his debts. They are monsters. The pivot was breathtaking. She was attempting to rewrite history in real time. She was aligning herself with the victim, painting our parents as the sole architects of the betrayal, conveniently erasing her own complicity. She thought sisterly solidarity would be my weakness. She thought I was still the lonely teenager desperate for a connection. I am so sorry I didn't see it sooner, she whispered, letting a single tear fall down her cheek. I was blind, but I see it now. I want to help you, Ellie. I know you are overwhelmed trying to run this massive estate by yourself. I can help you manage the business side. I can handle the marketing, the outreach, the branding. We could do it together. She gestured toward the small secondary structure sitting 50 yards away from the main house. I packed some things, she said, pointing to her heavy tote bag. I was hoping I could move into the guest cottage. Just for a little while. Just until we get the business stabilized. I can start working tomorrow. We are sisters, Ellie. We should be a team. I looked at the guest cottage. It was a beautiful 2-bedroom structure with a stone fireplace and a wraparound porch. It was currently empty. Then I looked back at Savannah. She did not want to work the vines. She did not want to learn the soil density or manage the irrigation lines. She saw the San Francisco well run dry, so she packed a bag and took a rideshare to the only remaining water source. She wanted to attach herself to the trust. I did not scream at her. I did not raise my voice. I spoke with the quiet, devastating clarity of someone who held all the cards. You do not want to be a team, Savannah, I said. You want a free apartment. She recoiled, her face flushing with sudden defensive anger. That is not true, she snapped. I am offering my professional expertise. You are 18 years old. You do not know how to run a corporate brand. This is not a corporate brand, I replied smoothly. This is an agricultural enterprise. And my professional expertise comes from the man who built it. Not from a failed mindfulness subscription box. Savannah opened her mouth to argue, but I did not let her speak. I closed the distance between us, standing just 2 feet away. Do not stand in my driveway and pretend you are a victim of David Foster, I said, my voice dropping an octave. You were sitting in the corner of the study when he shook hands with the Apex developers. You negotiated a $2 million cut of my inheritance before Grandpa's casket was even in the ground. Her eyes widened in genuine shock. She did not know I had been listening outside the door. I leaned in closer. You took me to a spa in Napa and tried to gaslight me into selling the farm. I continued quoting her exact words back to her. You told me it was a boring old farm bleeding them dry. You tried to convince me that sacrificing my future was a moral obligation just so you could fund your vanity project. You were not a bystander, Savannah. You were a co-conspirator. The blood drained from her face. The manufactured tears stopped instantly. She realized in that exact moment that her manipulation tactics were entirely useless. She was not dealing with the quiet, compliant younger sister anymore. She was dealing with the successor beneficiary. Please, Ellie, she whispered. The fake solidarity was gone. It was replaced by raw, unpolished panic. I have nowhere else to go. My credit cards are maxed out. My investors pulled out. I cannot stay in that house with him. I looked at her. I felt a fleeting microscopic pang of pity. She was 24 years old and she had 0 survival skills. My parents had raised a show pony and now the barn was burning down. But pity is not a business strategy. You are my sister, Savannah, I said. My tone softened slightly. but the boundary remained rigid as steel. And because you are my sister, you are welcome to visit for Thanksgiving. You are welcome to come to dinner on Christmas. You can sit at my table. I pointed toward the guest cottage, then back to the gravel driveway. But you will never have a key to that house, I stated with absolute finality. You will never have a key to the main farmhouse. You will never be an employee of this estate. And you will never see a single dime of the trust capital. Savannah stared at me. Her chest heaved. The reality of her situation crushed the remaining fight out of her. She had spent her entire life assuming she would inherit the world, only to find herself standing on a dirt road, begging the sister she ignored for a handout. She did not say another word. She bent down, picked up her heavy canvas tote bag, and turned away. She pulled her phone from her pocket and ordered another rideshare back to the city. I stood in the driveway and watched her wait by the county road. I did not invite her inside to stay warm while the car arrived. I let the cold air surround her. She finally understood that the quiet girl she had bullied for years was now entirely untouchable. I turned my back and walked toward the south shed to finish the inventory count with Mateo. The estate was secure from my sister, but the financial audit Evelyn Vance was running in the city was about to uncover a secret that would force me to deal with my parents one last time. They had left a trail of financial wreckage, and the blast radius extended straight to my front gate. The dust from Savannah's departure had barely settled on the gravel driveway when my phone rang. It was a Thursday morning. I was sitting at the kitchen island drinking coffee, reviewing a stack of irrigation invoices. I saw Evelyn Vance flash across the caller ID. I answered on the first ring. Evelyn did not deal in small talk. She bypassed the standard greetings and went straight to the numbers. "We finished the forensic audit of the estate operational accounts," she said. Her voice sounded thin and metallic over the cellular connection. "The primary ledgers are clean. Thomas ran a very tight ship regarding the commercial grape yields. But I found a secondary income stream your father failed to cover up." I set my pen down. I asked her what kind of income stream. Evelyn explained the anomaly. On the far north edge of the 40-acre property, hidden behind a dense line of ancient oak trees, sat an old carriage house. It was originally built in the 1920s. I had rarely gone up there as a child, because it was isolated and out of sight from the main farming operations. A year before my grandfather passed away, my father had requested funds from the estate to perform routine structural maintenance on the building. Grandpa authorized the repairs to prevent the roof from caving in. But David and Victoria did not just fix the roof. According to the hidden financial trails Evelyn uncovered, my parents had quietly transformed the rustic carriage house into a luxury weekend retreat. They furnished it with imported Italian leather sofas, high thread count linens, and a private wine fridge. They did not list it on public rental websites. They circulated a private booking link among their elite country club circles in San Francisco. They were charging their wealthy friends a premium cash rate for exclusive weekend getaways in wine country. The funds were funneled directly into a Shell LLC, registered under my mother's maiden name. They were running an off-the-books hotel on my grandfather's land, pocketing the untaxed revenue to subsidize their leased luxury cars and designer wardrobes. "It is unauthorized commercial subletting," Evelyn stated. "It is also misappropriation of trust assets and tax fraud." David was essentially stealing from his own father while Thomas was sick. I listened to the cold facts. The sheer audacity of their entitlement was breathtaking. They had treated the Sonoma property like their own personal ATM long before the developers from Apex Hospitality ever entered the picture. I asked Evelyn what our next legal move should be. "We can sue them for the stolen revenue," she offered. "But considering the corporate lawsuit Apex just dropped on your father's head, he is effectively insolvent. You cannot squeeze water from a stone." I did not care about the stolen rental cash. I cared about the perimeter of my life. I wanted the borders sealed. "Draft an eviction notice," I told her. I instructed Evelyn to draw up a formal 30-day notice to vacate the carriage house. But I did not stop at a simple eviction. I requested a permanent legally binding trespassing injunction against David and Victoria Foster. They were required to remove their staging furniture and any personal effects from the North Ridge structure within 1 month. After that deadline expired, they were barred from stepping foot on any parcel of land associated with the trust. If they crossed the county line and approached the estate, local law enforcement would arrest them on site. Evelyn drafted the paperwork that same afternoon. She hired a private process server in San Francisco. The courier delivered the thick stack of legal documents directly to the Pacific Heights townhouse. I did not receive a phone call from my father when the papers landed in his hands. He was out of threats. He was out of leverage. The 30-day countdown began. I spent that month fortifying the farm. I hired a private security contractor to upgrade the perimeter. We installed heavy wrought iron gates at the main entrance of the long gravel driveway. We wired the gates with digital keypads and encrypted access codes. I replaced every single lock on the main farmhouse, the tractor sheds, and the administrative offices. I was not just changing the hardware, I was changing the entire power structure of my existence. The deadline arrived on a cold, overcast Tuesday in early December. The locksmiths had just finished installing the final deadbolt on the North Ridge carriage house. The luxury furniture my parents had purchased with stolen money had been hauled away by a moving company the day before. The structure was empty, smelling only of fresh paint and pine needles. I walked back down the dirt path toward the main house. The morning fog was thick, muting the colors of the valley into shades of gray and muted green. As I reached the front porch, I heard the low idle of an engine down by the county road. I stood on the wooden steps and looked toward the new iron gates at the end of the driveway. A dark sedan was idling on the shoulder of the asphalt. It was not a luxury car. It looked like a standard rental vehicle. The driver's side door opened. My father stepped out into the damp air. I did not move. I stayed on the porch, my hands resting in the pockets of my canvas work jacket. He walked slowly toward the closed iron gates. The tailored Italian suits were gone. He wore a plain wool coat that looked a size too large. The physical toll of the last 6 weeks was written across every inch of his posture. The Apex lawsuit had drained the remaining life from his features. His shoulders slumped. His hair seemed thinner, lacking the polished silver shine he used to maintain for his society galas. He looked hollow. He reached the iron bars. He wrapped his hands around the cold metal and looked up the long gravel driveway. We were separated by 50 yards of dirt and an impenetrable legal barricade. He saw me standing on the porch. I met his gaze. There was no shouting. There were no desperate pleas or venomous insults echoing across the property. The silence between us carried the crushing weight of his failure. He stood at the gate looking at the sprawling empire he thought he could steal. He looked at the dormant vines stretching across the rolling hills. He looked at the heavy machinery parked near the barn. He looked at the teenager standing on the porch who held the deed to all of it. I watched his chest rise and fall with a heavy sigh. In that quiet moment, the reality of his choices finally caught up to him. He realized he had traded his daughter for a payday that never arrived. He had burned down his own family for a check that bounced. I waited for the anger to rise in my chest. I waited for the vindictive thrill of victory. It never came. I did not hate the broken man standing outside my gate. Hate requires a surplus of emotional energy, and I had directed all my energy into the soil. What I felt was a profound, quiet pity. He had spent his entire life chasing an illusion of wealth in the city, while entirely ignoring the genuine legacy growing right under his feet. My father let go of the iron bars. He took one last look at the farmhouse, turned around, and walked back to his rental car. He climbed into the driver's seat and pulled away, disappearing into the coastal fog. I turned around and walked inside my house. The eviction was the final step of the transition. The Pacific Heights chapter of my life was permanently closed. I officially took the helm of the estate. The following week, I filed the commercial paperwork with the county to slightly rebrand the agricultural operation. I changed the business license to Thomas Foster Legacy Vines. I was no longer waiting for a seat at my parents' dining table. I owned the entire farm. The winter pruning season arrived. I spent my days walking the rows with Mateo, clipping the dormant wood, preparing the vines for the spring bloom. We were clearing away the dead growth so the new shoots could thrive. I applied the same philosophy to the physical structures on the property. During a rainy afternoon in late December, I decided to clear out the old administrative storage room located deep inside the main wine cellar. It was a damp, subterranean space filled with broken chairs, dusty filing cabinets, and empty glass bottles. I wanted to renovate the space into a proper tasting room. I spent hours hauling boxes of old marketing materials up the stone steps. As I moved a heavy wooden pallet away from the far brick wall, my flashlight caught the gleam of brushed steel. Hidden behind a stack of rotting wine crates, bolted directly into the foundation of the house, was a heavy industrial safe. It was covered in a thick layer of dust and spider webs. I recognized the manufacturer. It was the same brand of safe Grandpa Thomas used to secure the payroll cash in the main office. I wiped the dirt away from the mechanical dial. My grandfather was a man of precise habits. I knew exactly what sequence of numbers he used for his combination locks. I turned the cold metal dial to the right, to the left, and back to the right. The heavy steel tumblers clicked into place. The handle turned. I pulled the heavy door open, revealing the dark interior. What I found inside that hidden vault did not just explain the past, it changed the entire foundation of the war I thought I had just won. The heavy steel door groaned on its hinges. The air inside the hidden vault was stale and cold. There were no stacks of cash sitting on the shelves. There were no gold bars or valuable family heirlooms. There was only a single black fireproof lockbox resting in the center of the dark space. I pulled the box out and set it on top of a wooden crate. The lock was a standard mechanical key cylinder. I walked up the stone steps, retrieved the master ring of estate keys Grandpa Thomas kept in his top desk drawer, and returned to the cellar. The third key I tried turned the cylinder with a sharp click. I lifted the lid. Inside sat a thick leather-bound ledger and a sealed envelope. My name was written across the front of the envelope in my grandfather's precise handwriting. I did not open the letter first. I opened the ledger. Grandpa Thomas always recorded his crop yields in blue ink. He recorded equipment purchases and payroll in black ink. The numbers filling the pages of this hidden ledger were written entirely in red. I traced my finger down the columns. The dates went back 8 years. This was long before the Apex Hospitality Group ever scouted our parcel. This was long before Savannah launched her first failed lifestyle brand. The entries documented massive unauthorized withdrawals from the primary commercial farming accounts. $50,000 transferred on a Tuesday, $80,000 routed out on a Friday. The destination accounts were traced to shell corporations based in Delaware. I cross-referenced the dates in the ledger with my own childhood memories. 8 years ago was the exact year my parents purchased the Pacific Heights townhouse. It was the year my father bought his first imported sports car. It was the year my mother started hosting catered charity luncheons. David Foster did not build his venture capital firm from the ground up. He built his entire San Francisco facade using stolen money. He had embezzled nearly $2 million from his own father. I set the red ledger down. My hands felt unnervingly steady. I picked up the cream-colored envelope and broke the wax seal. The letter was dated 3 years ago. It was written the exact same week Evelyn Vance filed the paperwork to create the generation-skipping irrevocable trust. I read my grandfather's words in the dim light of the wine cellar. "My dearest Ellie," the letter began. "If you are reading this, you have secured the perimeter. You have claimed the soil. You did what I could not do." The next paragraph laid out the cold, hard reality of my family tree. Grandpa Thomas did not discover the embezzlement after the fact. He watched it happen in real time. He watched his only son siphon the lifeblood of the farm to buy country club memberships and tailored suits. "He committed federal wire fraud, Ellie," my grandfather wrote. "The IRS was 6 months away from an audit that would have sent your father to a federal penitentiary. I could not let my son go to prison. I could not let your mother face that public humiliation. So I covered his tracks. I liquidated my personal retirement accounts and quietly repaid the commercial ledgers before the government looked too closely. I sat on the cold stone floor. My chest felt tight. My father had not just been an entitled heir waiting for his payday. He was a criminal who had already been caught. But I did not offer him grace without a cost. The letter continued. I told David the debt was paid, but the consequence was total surrender. I stripped him of his inheritance. I told him he would never own a single grain of dirt in Sonoma. I created the irrevocable trust the very next morning. I lowered the paper. The pieces of the puzzle snapped together with blinding clarity. My father knew about the trust. He always knew he was disinherited. He knew he had zero legal claim to the estate. That was why he was so desperate to force my signature before my 18th birthday. He was not just trying to cash out a redundant asset, he was trying to steal back the inheritance he had forfeited to stay out of federal prison. He thought because Grandpa Thomas was dead, the secret died with him. He thought he could outsmart an 18-year-old girl and rewrite his own history. He did not realize that Thomas Foster played a very long game. You are not just the owner of this land, Ellie, the letter concluded. You are the protector of the truth. I chose you because you have the quiet strength required to hold the line. I knew David would try to circumvent the trust. I knew he would try to manipulate you. I needed an heir who loved the roots more than the money. Take care of the vines. They will always take care of you. I folded the letter. I placed it back inside the fireproof box along with the red ledger. I locked the box and carried it upstairs to the main office. I did not call my father to confront him. I did not need to rub his face in the dirt. The corporate lawsuit from Apex Hospitality was already dismantling his life in San Francisco. He was facing bankruptcy and public disgrace. That was his harvest. He planted the seeds of deception 8 years ago, and now he had to eat the bitter fruit. I did not just win a petty argument over real estate. I executed a decade-long masterstroke of justice designed by a farmer who understood exactly how to prune dead weight from a family tree. That was 1 year ago. Today, the Thomas Foster legacy vines are thriving. We just finished the autumn harvest. The yield was the highest this property has seen in 20 years. Mateo is running the field crews with precision. We hired 3 new permanent staff members to manage the increased production. We converted the old carriage house into an administrative hub for our new direct-to-consumer wine club. I did not go to a prestigious university in the city. I enrolled in agricultural science classes at the local community college. I spend my mornings testing soil acidity and my afternoons negotiating regional distribution contracts. I have not spoken to David or Victoria since the day the iron gates closed. I hear rumors through the regional grapevine. The Pacific Heights townhouse was sold to cover the Apex settlement. They moved into a small leased apartment in a cheaper district. Savannah finally had to get a real job working as a junior marketing assistant for a local retail brand. They are living the exact life they were terrified of. They are living a life without a safety net. I am standing on the wraparound porch right now. The sun is setting over the Mayacamas Mountains. The sky is painted in brilliant streaks of crushed violet and burnt orange. The temperature is dropping, but I am not cold. The air smells like pine needles and crushed grapes. I look out over the 40 acres of vines. They are dormant now, resting for the winter, preparing for the spring bloom. People place a lot of value on bloodlines. We are taught from a very young age that family is an unbreakable bond. We are told to forgive the unforgivable simply because we share DNA. We are expected to set ourselves on fire just to keep our parents warm. I do not believe that anymore. Blood does not make a family. Respect does. Trust does. Showing up when the ground is frozen and doing the hard work together that makes a family. Grandpa Thomas understood that truth. He bypassed the son who shared his name and handed his legacy to the granddaughter who shared his calluses. I built my own table. I hold the only key to the front gate, and the only people allowed inside are the ones who respect the soil. That is my story. If this story resonated with you, please leave a comment below. I want to ask you a serious question. If you found a secret ledger hidden in your own family home, a ledger that proved a dark truth about someone you were supposed to trust, what would you do? Would you confront them directly, or would you use the information to quietly secure your own future? Tell me your thoughts in the comments. I read every single one. Hit the like button and subscribe if you want to hear more stories about holding the line and finding your own power. Thank you for listening. I look out over the Mayacamas Mountains as the sun dips below the ridge. The air turns cold, carrying the scent of crushed grape leaves and damp soil. The 40 acres of dormant vines stretch out in the fading light. They are resting. So am I. I spent my childhood trying to earn a seat at a table where I was never wanted. Now I own the land the table was built on. The silence on this porch used to feel lonely. Today, it just feels like peace. Looking back at the wreckage my parents left behind, I carry two distinct lessons with me. The first is that silence is the most effective strategy you can wield against arrogant people. My family confused my quietness for submission. They assumed because I did not scream, I did not see them. Let the people who underestimate you keep talking. They will always hand you the blueprint to their own downfall. The second lesson is harder, but it saved my life. Blood is nothing more than a biological accident. It does not entitle anyone to your loyalty, your bank account, or your future. A real family is built on mutual respect. It is built by the people who stand next to you in the dirt and help you tend the roots, not the ones waiting to steal the harvest. You owe nothing to the people who try to sell you out. I am building my own table now, and the gate stays locked. Thank you for listening to my journey. If you found value in this, please subscribe to Senior Echo Stories for more narratives about holding the line and reclaiming your power. Share your own experiences in the comments. I will be reading.